one of the real highlights of the Manchester conference in Salford was a group of young women with diagnosis of FASD talking about me and my FASD, and they launched their FASD Manifesto, which spoke so eloquently about their lives and how to treat them, how to acknowledge them as well alongside their condition, alongside FASD. And I think one of the things we've always tried to do on our webinars is to give the broadest understanding to the widest group of people about what FASD is, Fetal Alcohol Spectrum Disorders, and how it manifests itself, how people live with it, how people live with the condition, and how people actually manage their lives with FASD. And I think one of the highlights of that group themselves was when Paula McPhail came onto the microphone and spoke so beautifully, and it really hit a chord with so many people that they felt they really connected with exactly your message, Paula. And it was lovely to have that. And when you agreed to come on to our webinar, I was so delighted. You know, we've known each other for a while, haven't we? Because you came on you started up on our first FASD friendship groups when we went online and started that. And we've worked with your mum quite often, Mary Ellen as well, and spoken with her on a lot of occasions. So we know each other. This is nice familiar territory for us, isn't it? Yeah. So I'm absolutely delighted to be able to welcome you, Paula. Why don't we just start by telling us a little bit about how did you end up in Manchester at the conference then? Because, you know, you live in Scotland, don't you? Whereabouts in Scotland are you?
So I'm in Ayr. It's like a 45-minute drive from Glasgow.
Yeah.
So it's I say a wee town, but it's quite a big town. So I think how we got there was we've always worked with FASD and me, and we've always worked with them. I think they got in touch with my mum and says we're making up a manifest for FASD. We would like it if Paula could join that and basically get her opinion on what we should do with FASD moving forward, and what people should know about how to work with someone who's got FASD. And that's kind of how we came on board it.
Yeah, and that was brilliant. And it was such a good mix of people, wasn't it? Everyone spoke so well. I think for me, one of the most impactful moments of that, and I don't know if you felt this as well, was that in the room, there were times when there were some delays in people thinking about their answers. So the microphone was being handed around, but every single person in that room understood FASD at that conference. And everybody gave that individual or those individuals the time to be able to think of their responses. And then when they spoke so perfectly about what they wanted to say. And it was difficult because you're under the spotlight, aren't you?
Yeah.
With all these professionals around. How did you feel about it?
I was nervous because of it is in front of professionals, because I'm not a professional myself, even though I'm a live experience, but guess I'm a professional in FASD because I live it. But when you're in front of like professionals who know it all and like degrees and everything, it's like, and you're telling them what to do.
Absolutely.
It's like scary because you're like, oh my God, I don't know if that's right to do, but it is.
But do you know, the thing was, they listened, didn't they?
Yeah, they did. They definitely
Everyone listened. And I saw, because I came up to see you afterwards and your mum, and you were so flooded with people talking to you afterwards, weren't you, in the break? It was amazing. It was really amazing. So well done. And we'll have a look at that manifesto a little bit later. But I'd like to go and talk a little bit more about you and your history, really, because we spoke just before we came on air, and you were saying about how you got a diagnosis when you were how old?
I was 16 years old when I got mine.
Right. Okay. Now you're one of three siblings. Well,
yes, I am.
You're one of three adopted
I'm one of
siblings.
The adopted siblings, but I've got like 6 altogether.
Yeah, yeah. And you know, it's really interesting because again, we were talking about your birth mother beforehand.
Yeah.
And how you feel about that. And I'm really interested in this because nearly every single person that I've spoken to that has FASD, none of them blame their birth mother. And I think this is so important because there is a lot of stigma still attached to the condition, isn't there? And you know, we're trying to educate people to sort of say, look, there are so many reasons. Tell me a little bit about your feelings towards your birth mother.
So I don't blame my mum. I wish she never did it. I think every person who's got FASD wish their mum didn't do it, but at the same time, there's not enough education out there either. And I didn't know what my mum was going through at the time she was pregnant with me. I don't know what her mental state was. I don't know what her life was like. And my mum's got a lot of issues of her own. And she couldn't look after me and my sister, which is, I totally understand. She loved us, but she just couldn't be a mum, and I don't blame her for what she did. At the same time, if she never did what she did, I wouldn't be able to be who I am today. Like, absolutely
right, absolutely. And I think that's such an important point to make. And you know, the lovely story is, you know, you along with 3 of your siblings were adopted by Mary Ellen and Billy, weren't you? And I love the fact that when I asked you just before we came on air as well, you said, I asked you, when were you adopted?
So I was 17 years old when I got adopted. I came to stay with my mum and dad when I was 18 months old and finally got adopted when I was 17.
Excellent. And I asked you, didn't I? I'll ask it again because I thought it was so good. How did that make you feel?
It made me feel, I always knew that I was part of the family no matter what, because I was always treated like one of their own anyway, but it felt like amazing because it was like, it's actually on paper now, and I can like see their mum and dad on paper.
Absolutely. No, that's beautiful. So one of the questions that I really want to ask you, you had a diagnosis when you were 16. And that's quite late, isn't it, for a diagnosis? You know, you just got there in time with the pediatricians, which is amazing. Let's just talk about how that journey of getting a diagnosis happened, because your brother already had a diagnosis, didn't he? And we've met your brother as well. An amazing character. I love him dearly. Amazing. So tell me a little bit about how that happened, how you got the diagnosis.
So I got the diagnosis through, so the NHS, Ayrshire and Arran here, got a pilot pot of money from the government to diagnose children with FASD with the condition. It was about 2014 they got it. 2018. Oh, sorry, 2018. What before that? So 2018 that they got it, but I think they got it before that because of my mum got a training when I was 15 on the condition. And it was in Ayrshire and Arran that was doing it, and that my mum was sitting there and she's like, oh, this is Paula, this is just ticking all the boxes, everything that she was saying. I was like, oh my god, it's Paula, because my mum always knew there was something not right with me, but she didn't know what it was. And every time she would take me to the doctors, they would always say, it's just the Paula syndrome, that's what it is. And mum was like, okay, it's Paula syndrome. And then when she went there, it finally clicked for her. And then so I got it through them, and I just made it through because I was 15.
That's right.
And it was a year process to get it. It was a long process. You had to go through OT, psychologist. There was a lot of things you had to go through. Speech and language. It was a lot of things. I think the most big bit that took most up was the mind bit. We had to remember things and write things down and things like that. Was the longest, but I managed to get it when I was 16, which was really good.
Right. And how did that make you feel when you got a diagnosis?
It was such a relief, because before I thought it was just me and I was being stupid and I was never going to be able to be like anybody else and I would never be able to do anything. But when I got it, my confidence just went right up, and I was like, it's not me, it's my brain, and I can do these things. I just need supports in place.
And that's fascinating. I think that's a story. There are a lot of families that come and attend these webinars trying to gain a greater insight into about diagnosis as well, the process of the diagnosis, but also, should they get a diagnosis, what's the impact that it's going to have on the kid, on the family? And, you know, we've spoken about this on many occasions before, about the importance of the diagnosis, because it allows you to access the right level of support that you need. Is that what you've found?
Yeah, it definitely does. And I think it also, that your child needs a diagnosis to understand herself, because if your child's not getting a diagnosis of FASD or any other condition, they're going to think it's just them and that they're stupid and they're never going to be able to achieve anything. And I can speak from experience from getting the diagnosis that it actually changed my life for the better. It made me so much confidence in myself, and to talk about it and to realise that for a child who gets the diagnosis, they'll finally realise it's not them, it's their brain, and they can do things, and it's getting them to understand that their brain is different from everybody else, but it can still achieve the exact same things. It just takes a bit longer, and it just needs more support.
And understanding that is just crucial, isn't it? Okay, I mean, that's really interesting. I'm also interested to understand, you must have, after you got the diagnosis, there must have been times after it where you thought, oh my gosh, no wonder I was having problems with that when I was at school. There must have been so many memories that came back to you. You thought, well, surely if I had a diagnosis earlier, or if I understood this better earlier on, what sort of feelings did you have like that?
I had like a few of them, especially when my wee brother had it at a younger age, and I've seen how much he's achieved, and I've realised that I could have probably achieved more if I did have the earlier diagnosis, because I would have had the earlier supports in place when I was in primary school, and it would follow me straight to high school, because it was high school where I started to really struggle at exam times. And I realised that I couldn't, because I copied off my friends a lot, but when it came to the exams, I couldn't copy my friends because of got to do it yourself. And that's where I really struggled.
Sorry, carry on.
And I do think if I had the diagnosis earlier, I would have probably achieved more, but it is what it is.
Absolutely. And I think at the same time, whilst you might have achieved more in some areas, you're now probably able to achieve so much more. Even today, you're able to educate so many young people and young families that have got young people, that if they're questioning it, they're wondering, you know, is there a possibility that we've got an FASD diagnosis here? And they will then pursue it further and faster. And maybe that's the reason why, who knows? But I'd love to go back, if I may, to when you were at school. Let's look back at your primary school. I know we spoke about this in the past and on some of our friendship groups, and one of the questions we put to everybody, or you put to us, was when did everybody feel they were different? That was the conversation in the friendship group. I don't know if you remember it. And there was a big group of people, and they were all saying similar sort of things that they noticed, probably first of all when they were at primary school, when they met other people. When did you notice, what sort of things did you notice that you were different?
I noticed I was different when my friends started to make jokes and I wasn't getting them, and they would all get it, but I would just laugh along, and then I would realise I didn't get that. Or like things that you're supposed to do your age, and I wasn't getting it, because also I also at the time I didn't understand why I wasn't getting it. I just thought it was me. And also the work at school, I was always slower than everybody else at school. I was always couldn't do. Everybody was always higher than me, and I was always in the lower group, and I couldn't do the work.
What areas particularly did you feel you struggled with most? Was it reading? Was it attention? What did you really struggle with?
It was a bit of everything, mostly with like my reading, my spelling, and taking in information. I couldn't take in a lot of information. I couldn't remember a lot of things. Attention, I would get really tired really easily, and then I wouldn't be able to concentrate.
Probably because you were concentrating so much that exhausted you as well, didn't it? Yeah. That makes so much sense. And how did you react then? What did you do? Did you either become very quiet? Because young girls at school, primary school level, develop this technique more so than boys of being able to mask.
Yeah, that's what I did. I masked it. I was the quiet kid. I didn't really cause any trouble. I just kept quiet and I just did as I was told. And I just kind of slipped under the radar. I think that's how I managed to go through primary school and high school for so long, because I was quiet and I didn't cause any trouble. I didn't make a loud noise. I just did the work, well, try to do the work as much as I could. Yeah.
Yeah, and it's a very common thing, isn't it? Because you're a peer mentor, aren't you? And you work with a lot of other young people, and I'm sure this is something that you say to them. What advice would you give a young person that's in a primary school or going into secondary school, maybe at the end of primary school, going into secondary school? Because that's a big transition, isn't it? It's a scary time. And probably more scary for somebody with FASD. What does that look like for you? What does that scariness feel like in your mind?
In my mind, it's as if somebody's like trapped you in a room with all your fears, and then you've got to, because when you're in primary school, you're in a wee bubble and you've only got one teacher to deal with, and then you go into high school, it's like 7 different classes, 7 different teachers, then you've got new people that you're meeting, then you get the bell, and then you've got everything moving every 50 minutes, and it's so overwhelming. What I would give advice to someone who's a child who's moving from primary school to high school is ask for help. If you need that help, ask someone. If you need that time out, go to a teacher that you trust, or go to your guidance teacher or someone and go and say, I don't know what's wrong. It's overwhelming and I don't know what to do. And or if you don't know, if the child can't communicate it, you should try and they just take themselves away from the situation, and then until they've figured out how to communicate it.
Yeah. And what was some of the things you found in the classroom when you went into secondary school? What you've mentioned very explicitly what the big differences are, and how that contrast happens. But let's say you're settling into your first year of secondary school. What are the big concerns for you then?
I think the concerns is moving to, because when you're in the first year, you make your friends, and you start to just finally get comfortable, and then you have to move to new classes again and new teachers. And I think the concern, it's like, oh, will I fit in with the new people that's going to be in my class? Will the teacher like me? Will I be able to do the work, because the work's going to get harder?
Yeah.
If you can barely do the work in the first year, and then you're like, all these things are going through your head, and you're worrying about it. And but when you're in first year, second year, and you're kind of just, your friends are your safe gateway. They were for me. They're the kind of reason how I got through school.
Right. And that's more about your personality.
Yeah.
Isn't it? Really, that's the personality that you've developed to be able to have those friends and maintain those friendships. I think this brings us really well onto friendships, because I think one of the things that we've noticed through our friendship groups, and one of the reasons you came on board at the beginning with the friendship groups was because you were a very good mentor to being able to advise others and also put people at ease. Because I think we found the very first, if you remember this, the very first friendship group we had, people were really struggling to talk to each other. And we used the subject of food, didn't we? Because they all have their favorite foods, and we can go around that, and it would go around the food, and it started to open up the subject talking about food. Now, how do you develop and build friendships? What is the difficulty that you had with friendships, or that that other people have with friendships?
I think the difficulty is because we're younger than our actual peers. It's really hard for for them to understand that the condition and things. I'm just lucky. I've got two friends who've stuck by me since primary 3, and they understand me. We did have a wee bit of a fallout from when we left school, for like communication, because I'm really bad at it. I can't text, I can't phone. I'm really, really bad. But I think that's the part of it, because of when you start to get older, your friendships, they rely on you to communicate with them rather than communicating with you. And for me, that's really hard. And probably with a child with FASD, it's really hard for them to communicate through texts or phone calls if you don't communicate with them first. If you communicate first, they'll communicate back. But if doing it the other way around, it's really difficult.
And do you find as well that, you know, this is something that we've noticed as well in the friendship groups, has been that the expectation of somebody that would expect to be able to act out or be able to be a friend, sometimes they just find it very difficult to try that, to put the effort in, because it is an effort at times, isn't it, to try and think of the rules of engagement, the rules of being able to, what sort of strategies or resources did you use to be able to try and make friends or communicate with people?
I think I'm still trying to learn that one, because I still can't communicate with people. See, I can stand up in front of thousands of people and tell you about FASD and about my story. I'm fine with talking about FASD in my life, me, but see, when I'm trying to make friends and trying to ask the questions that you need to ask, I have no idea how to do that. I have no idea how to talk to somebody one-to-one. I've no idea, unless they talk to me and ask me questions, then I'm fine with that. But me asking questions, I'm still trying to learn that.
And it's a long time, isn't it, to develop those skills? And also, do you feel that it's a bit fake because it doesn't come naturally to you, so you have to prepare in a particular way? That I find that fascinating. Thank you for that. That's amazing. And I'm sure that's a really insightful part for a lot of people. Now, some of the things you've spoken about, some of the areas that you really struggle with when you really get down, what gets you down? Because you always seem so happy and so lively and bubbly, but of course, I'm sure you must have those down times, those tough moments. Can you tell us a little bit about those?
So I get really, really tired really quickly. I'm all right in the beginning of the week in the morning. I'm all right, but then when it gets to the afternoon time, I'm really, really tired and can't do it. And when it gets to the end of the week, I'm like exhausted. So if I've had like a really busy week or I've had a full day, I think it's the slightest wee thing can like set me off. And it could be literally my dad telling me to go do something, and it would just stop me out. Or my mum telling me to do something, that's it. It's like, a meltdown happens. I'm not always a smiley, happy person. But
I can imagine.
But I think it's just when I get overwhelmed, and I don't know why I'm overwhelmed. And it could have been something that happened like a couple of weeks ago, or something that happened yesterday, or something that's going to happen. And it's just playing on my mind and it's overwhelmed me, and I don't know how to communicate it. So I just have it up there instead.
So when do you find you sleep well? Because one of the subjects we always bring up, because in our support groups and in our friendship groups, the subject of sleep is a real difficult one for many. Is that the case for you?
No, I'm a good sleeper.
There you go.
It doesn't matter how much I sleep, I'm still tired when I wake up. I could literally have like 13-hour sleeps and still be tired when I wake up. Or I can have like the normal amount, I still be tired. It doesn't really matter. I think I use a lot of my energy to kind of cope with daily things, and just try and be a person, basically.
Yes.
And I think that takes a lot of my energy out of me. I've
got another one that frequently comes up, and that's the subject of food as well. Do you have any issues around food?
No. I can't stop eating. I'm gonna.
Welcome to my world.
See, I can't feel when I'm hungry. No, I can feel when I'm hungry, but I can't feel when I'm full.
Yeah.
I can eat something and I feel like I'm full, and then like 5 minutes later or 10 minutes later, I'm hungry again, but I'm not, because I've just ate.
Yeah.
But I don't have that feeling of fullness.
Okay.
So I'm always hungry all the time.
Yeah, it's
I
interesting.
always snack.
Now, that brings me to another point, because one of the things we've spoken about, some of the very typical traits of an individual that has FASD and the related, we know there are 428 comorbidities that are connected with FASD. And that means that there's a vast spectrum, isn't there? It's a massive spectrum. And so every individual is unique. Everybody has a different area or different subjects that they find very difficult to manage and have different ways of managing them. And everybody has a different strategies that they use as well. Now, we've just found two subjects that are very, very different. You've got, certainly, I've met two of your other siblings. Now, have you all got FASD?
Yes, but my oldest brother hasn't got a diagnosis.
Okay.
So my younger brother and me, we've both got a diagnosis, but we can't find an adult doctor to diagnose FASD from our brothers in Scotland. We can't find anybody. And
that is a very common thing, isn't it?
Yeah.
And it really is something that we have to address, and the community, the FASD community, have to address that, because this is something that we're finding very, very common. So how do you have differences in the ways that you struggle, or that your FASD manifests itself, if you like?
We're all different. My brother is...
Go on, you've got an opportunity now to have a little dig at them. Go on.
So my brother is complete opposite from me. He has eaten. He doesn't like eating. He would rather not eat. He eats 3 plain hamburgers from McDonald's, a medium fries, and that's it. He has got a heart condition, and he has got 2 ankles. Yeah, 3 ankles. Sorry, 3 ankles in each foot. Wow. He has got a lot of sensory issues. So, for example, I've got a low pain, is it, where you feel every wee pain and you don't like pain?
Low pain threshold, yeah.
Yeah, where my wee brother has a high one, where if he got a cut in his back, he wouldn't be able to feel it. But see, if you put sun cream on him, he would scream the place down. Right. So, we're completely opposite. Like, it's unreal. Where my mum still needs to do a lot of stuff for my brother. Like, he can't wash his hair. He can't. Sometimes she needs to pick out his clothes for him. But now that he's getting older, he likes designer clothes, so it has to be designer, nothing else. Where I'm like, I don't care if it comes from pre-work or not. Like, I'm not bothered. So there is a lot of things that way. Where we're completely opposite. My older brother, I think we've got more in common there. He's a good eater. He can do a more, I think, because of he's not had a diagnosis, I think he's learned how to adapt more. Yeah. Where I've learned how to adapt. With my wee brother, he's had a diagnosis at 2.5, so he get people who understood him. So he's got a system around him that I've got a system around me now. Yeah. So he's always had that system, so he doesn't see anything different. Where I never had the system because I had to do it for myself, because I was treated like a normal child, I would say, but there's no such thing as a normal child. So I was treated like everybody else, where I wasn't, and that's how I've kind of learned how to adapt. Where my wee brother, he is independent, he can do a lot of things for himself, but there's also a lot of things that he can't do. Yeah.
No, that's very interesting, and sort of spelling out to people the differences that you can have within a family as well, which is fascinating. Now, one of the areas that I know listeners are always asking, and can I point out at this point to all those that are attending today that you are very welcome to put any questions into the Q&A section at the bottom, not into the chat because I won't be following that, but I'll have a look at the questions. And if there are any questions you want to ask Paula, feel free. I will be vetting them and going through them and put them to Paula if I get the chance while we're having a chat. But in the meantime, one of the things that we frequently get asked is, when you got a diagnosis and you look back at your past, what do you wish people had done differently to you? Or if you had had a diagnosis earlier, let's say, how would you wish people had treated you differently?
I think I would wish the teachers would understand better, and that my parents would understand better. I know that my mum, dad never knew about FASD, and what you don't know, you can't work with. And I have no blame against MD, because I think that everybody needs educated, and there's not enough education out there, especially when I was younger. But I just wish that I had the supports in place when I was younger, because I do think that there would be a lot of things that I could do, like my work. Like, I think I'd be a lot smarter than what I am.
So what would that have looked at? What would that support have been for you? What sort of support did you think you needed?
I think I needed like sports with people reading out questions for me, and people one-to-one with the teacher or with our assistant. Somebody writing down when I say something, they write it down in a different way, but it is the right answer, because what's in my head doesn't really come out on paper. And someone just to read the questions after it's been put it in a different way so that I could understand it better.
Yeah. And I notice as well, one of the big things about your advocacy, you also teach parents, don't you?
Yeah.
In parenting techniques and skills, and how to understand FASD better and understand the condition. And one of the questions that's come up, which is a really interesting one, has been about how to communicate more effectively with somebody with FASD, because frequently it ends in a battle, doesn't it? It ends in a fight. And that fight is usually because the question has been presented to you. Let's say I'm the parent, I've presented a question to you, or I've asked you to do something. Yeah. Your brain is thinking lots of other things at that time. What is that feeling when I've come in with that question to you? How do you respond to that? So
if you ask me a question, you would need to give me time to think the question, because if you think about it, think about the day that I probably had. I've been like at work, and then I've come home and you've asked me to go get my washing from my room. I need time to process that, because I haven't processed what's happened in the day. I haven't processed what happened last week. And it's just like, I make it feel like in my head, it just feels like it's gonna explode.
Yeah.
And it's just too overwhelming. And it feels off of full. When I have an overwhelming day and someone asks for a question, it just feels too full in there. And I feel like it's just all gonna explode.
And how can people, because it's really hard for a parent to understand that, isn't it?
Yeah.
And how can a parent ask a question, or how should they ask a question to you for you not to be able to just lose it on have that response, because you're trying to deal with all of that?
Yeah.
How should they manage that?
I think they should ask the question, but let the child do it on their own time.
Okay.
So even if it takes them 3 hours to go get their washing from the room, it's going to take them 3 hours, because that's them processing it. And if they haven't, and just give them wee reminders, like you can put up on the board saying, "Oh, reminder to take down your washing," or you can just say, "Just take down your washing whenever you want, whenever you get time, whenever you want to bring down your washing, you can." You can say the basket's there, you can put your washing into there, or it's the way they say it. Just change the way you say it, and give them time to process it.
Yeah.
And if you see that your child is having a bad day, and you think maybe if I ask this question it might be too overwhelming, then just don't talk to them.
Yeah, yeah. And
just let them be.
It is a completely different way of parenting, isn't it? Because, you know, I know we're in our family groups and our support groups. One of the things that we always speak about, you know, I've had for many years, my wife and I, we specialize in autism. We've worked with many children over the last 20 years that have autistic diagnosis and ADHD, and frequently combined. Now that's something that a lot of the FASD community have as well, because you've got some of these comorbidities. Have you got a diagnosis of ADHD or
No,
FASD?
I've just got FASD, but I do think I've got traits of them.
Yeah.
But I don't think I've got enough traits of them to get a diagnosis.
Okay.
But I'm okay with my diagnosis of FASD because I would rather that than nothing. So
it's so interesting you say that. I find that brilliant. That's a really, really important thing. And because I quite often I'm going to go back to when we were talking about the parenting, because one of the things that we do discuss quite often is actually changing the way that we communicate. We've had on here in the past a gentleman called Nick Barrett, who talks about positive behavioral support. And our experience has been that has been, let me put it another way. We're always in a rush. Everyone's in a rush. Parents will always say, yeah, but can you bring your washing down now? Because I'm going to put the load on in a minute. They're stressed. So they've asked you to do it. And you're like, you've forgotten. I remember Maggie Meg saying there's this fight or flight. You panic. And so therefore you either fight and get really angry, or you just storm off to your room because you can't manage that at the time. So you're absolutely right, aren't you? In the way that we communicate that more effectively, we have to change the way that we parent to be able to understand the condition and therefore understand the individual, because every individual is different. And so therefore you have to be able to do that. And I think you're making that really clear for us, which is lovely and really important. Thank you.
What I always say to parents is that a child with FASD can't change the way they behave, but a parent can change how they parent.
Absolutely. Absolutely. No, I think that's so eloquently put. So tell us a little bit, if we can, about, you know, when you moved in, you touched on your friendships when you left school and your communicating or lack of communication with them. When you transitioned into adulthood, how was that for you? What did that look like for you?
It was quite difficult. Because I went to college and then I had to leave college because college says they couldn't support me. So when you go into college, you're basically an adult, where I need my mum. My mum's my brain, and she, without my mum, I can't function basically. But so when I was at college, they asked me what supports I needed, and I never told them what supports I needed because I thought I didn't need them where I did need them. Where if my mum was there, she would have been able to say she needs this, 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 this in place. And by the time I got halfway through my course and I was really, really struggling, and my mum went in and said, well, she needs this in place. And they were like, well, we can't put that in place now because we don't have that support there. So I had to leave, and that's how Oshay started up. Because I left there and I was like, what am I going to do now? That was my career, and I don't know what I'm going to do.
And what career was that? What were you looking at? What were you studying?
I was studying childcare.
Okay.
I was doing that because I love working with kids. I grew up with kids, and I always thought I'll be a nursery teacher because I really like it. But that didn't happen. But I did end up working with kids anyway because I mentor kids, so it did work out in a way.
Absolutely. And you know, with your support network around you at the same time, which is reassuring and comforting, and it makes you feel good about yourself, because those moments, you must have had lows from that experience, because it's a frightening experience, isn't it, when you think, well, what am I going to do now then?
Yeah. And I didn't know what I was going to do. And Mom was like, do you know what, we know about FASD because we had training from NHS, and like, we know about it, we know the live experience, we know that there's not enough support out there in Scotland for kids, or because at the time it was just kids that we knew, or for adults. So we were like, do you know what, let's open up a centre where people can come and ask for support, and we'll support like and train professionals about FASD, and that's what we did.
Yeah, no, that's really interesting. And you've got a lot of people that you mentor and work with. How does it work when families, because, you know, one of the questions that has come up again here has been about how the impacts of negative behaviors in the house can have such an impact on the other siblings and the other members of the family, and it can be debilitating, can't it? It can really have a big impact. How do you manage that one? What sort of experiences have you had of that?
We have got a lot of experience, because you do need to treat a child with FASD differently from your parenting. You can't punish them, because punishments don't work with children with FASD. Like sticker charts don't work, not steps don't work, because they don't learn from consequences. And trying to say that we are still struggling in our family, saying that that's not how it works. We do it this way. We do discipline them, but we discipline them when nobody's there in a different way. And it's trying to just educate your family as much as can and get them to understand as much as possible. And it will be difficult and a long fight, but
yeah, absolutely. And I totally agree with that. And I think one of the advices that we would recommend to anybody that is struggling at this time, we offer one-to-one clinics. I know O'Shea's, you have a lot of support that you offer your families, and there are communities that are part of the UK FASD Alliance that are littered all over the country. There's someone near you that can help support and can help offer you a bit of guidance, some resources, even just an ear to listen to. That's the really important thing. You don't have to be fighting on your own. There are strategies you can have. And I mentioned earlier, there's positive behavioral support. This is something that has been really sort of publicized recently quite a lot. Kath Burke has asked, were you ever in denial of your difficulties, and did you find it hard to understand that some things would always be hard for you?
Yeah, sometimes I have a denial of difficulties, sorry, because sometimes I don't notice it.
Yeah.
But other people around me notice it, where my mum would notice it, where she'd be like, you can't do this, but I'm like, I can do that. And she's like, yeah, you can, but you need support in place to do that. And I'm like, okay.
Can you give us an example of something like that that you might be able to think of?
So like, for example, for like brushing your teeth, it seems like so easy, an easy thing to do, but it's the remembering to do it. And I'm really, really bad at that, but I think I can do it, but I can't.
Yeah.
So I've got alarms on my phone to tell me when to brush my teeth and wash my face and get up, get dressed. And my mum needs to pick out my clothes for me because I'm really bad at doing that. And like cleaning my room, I cannot do that. That overwhelms me. And my mum needs to put strategies in place to help me with that as well.
Yeah. And it's that understanding and that support that's really important. Now, we've spoken a lot about some of the difficulties and the challenges and what have you. And I always like to make it a point of saying that there are so many positives as well. Every individual has their strengths, and we have to really pick up on that.
Yeah,
this is the time for you to shine and show off about some things. Tell me, what are your greatest strengths? Obviously, communication is one, because we all have seen that today, and we've seen that in the past. Communication is one of your strengths. Tell us some of your others.
I think I'm a kind person. I'm a caring person. I'm an understanding person. I'm a good listener, even though I can't take in the information. I do listen to a lot of people, and I do try and help out as much as I can. And I always want to please people, and I always want to help everybody. Even if I can't help them, I try and find a way to help them.
You're great with the babies.
And I'm great with kids as well, because I've got 2 nephews that I'm really hands-on with, and I'm really good with them, and they love me.
Yeah.
I'm the favourite auntie.
Excellent. That's so lovely to hear. I think what now would be a really good time, because we've spoken about a lot of the things that you've found difficult to manage, about your diagnosis, about where you've come, about the advocacy that you do as well. And when we were in Manchester and you gave the presentation on my FASD and the FASD Manifesto, can you tell us a little bit about what you presented there, what you were talking about?
So we were talking about what would we change and want people to know about FASD and change differently. And I said to basically to make it as symptoms, behaviours of the condition. It's a brain-based condition, and the behaviours that come from the condition as symptoms of the condition. It's not that they're being bad, it's the symptoms of their condition, and they need supports in place to thrive. And like you say, they all have strengths, and don't see us as FAS, a child with FASD, oh that's a shame, because we don't see ourselves like that. We see ourselves as like an ordinary person, but we just know that we need extra supports in place to thrive in the world. That's all it is. And just treat us as the person that we are.
And this was the FASD Manifesto was created by you and me and my FASD team from the National Organisation of FASD, and Sandy Butcher was leading that presentation with you, wasn't she? And so afterwards, on the next day, you did some filming, didn't you?
Yes, I did.
Tell us a bit about the filming. What was that about?
So it was a bit about asking questions for people who've got FASD, and basically getting our experiences, and telling them how to like cope with it, and how we coped with it, and how we did it. So for example, like it would be questions like, I'm trying to remember, sorry, it was so long ago.
Oh, I know, I put you on the spot
there. So it's,
would you like to, how would you like someone to treat you when you were there?
So it was like, how would you like somebody to treat you when you were like at school? How would you like your teachers to treat you? And we would say that we just want them to understand us and to give us more time, and to basically give us more time to process, give us, if we don't understand the question, to basically explain it a bit more in depth, or in a different way as well. And like it would be questions like, how would you handle with daily routines? And we would say how we've got alarms on our phones and people to remind us. And
the friendship groups that we run at FASD Awareness, we have different age groups, don't we? So we've got an adult friendship group, which is 18 plus, and then we've got an 11 to 16-year-old friendship group, and these are people from all over the world now that come to those friendship groups. And give a bit of insight, it's not all about FASD. They can talk about it if they like it. They're usually run by Maggie May, and those friendship groups are about building bonds with like-minded people. And you've done that, haven't you? You've got your friends that understand you and you understand them. And, you know, they might have FASD, they might not. It doesn't really matter, does it? It's about people that actually accept you and love you for who you are. Now, I think this is a perfect opportunity for us to share your presentation of the FASD Manifesto. So bear with me while I share the screen, and hopefully you can all hear this.
And my FASD, me and my FASD.
How we want you to treat us by people with FASD.
Listen to us.
Let us talk to you about how we feel. Talk to us, our parents and carers. We are experts in experience. We want to be believed.
Be kind. Don't call FASD a problem. It's something we are born with and live with. This is not our fault.
Speak slowly and calmly. We don't understand when you talk with words we don't know. Shouting upsets us. Keep things simple. Break subjects down. Don't use complicated words. Make sure forms have pictures to help us to understand. Researchers, please consider interviewing us rather than using long forms. Remember, yes, no questions can be very hard for us.
Be patient. We need time to understand what you are saying. We get really muddled up sometimes. Don't talk over us, and we aren't being awkward in conversations. Give us time to relax. We need to unwind, especially if it's been very tense. Otherwise, we might act out. No, our brains are different, and sometimes we don't get it. Remember, just because you can't see our disability doesn't mean we don't have one. Just because we are good at talking doesn't mean we don't have difficulties. We aren't weird or angry, we just struggle.
Understand why things are harder for us. Learn to understand our triggers. Know that workplaces are difficult as FASD is invisible and they don't understand.
Remember, our difficulties are lifelong. Ignoring our FASD can cause big mental health problems for us.
Treat us with the same respect as others. Treat us the way you would like to be treated. Give respect and you will get respect. We are trying our best.
Keep things upbeat. It's easy for us to feel rejected.
Learn more about FASD. Do your research. Get training.
Don't try, do. We are sick of people saying that they understand or that they are trying to help, but they do nothing. Please tell the next person the information. Don't bury it in our records.
Help us to shine brighter. We can help you to understand our condition. We're unique and different. There's so much we can do. Never give up on us. It's a difficult condition, but we still have vision and dreams.
Me and my FASD. Me and my FASD.
The first time that we saw that, when you presented at the conference, that had a huge impact on everybody because it really spelt it out and made it very clear to everybody what your concerns are and actually how people should manage FASD better. Now, what's the response that you've had to that?
I've had a really good response to it. I think a lot of people understand better. When it comes from someone who actually lives with the condition, they take it in more than somebody actually just talking facts.
Yeah.
Because of it, somebody who actually lives with the condition and can tell you what to do because of they live it, and they know what not to do because they know what's not going to work for them and what's going to work for other people.
Absolutely. The greatest impact from that, I think, was that you all made it yourselves. I know Georgie, she did a lot of the editing on it as well. And so it was created by you for people. And that, I think, has the greatest impact. And I think if we, the public and others that understand FASD and want to understand more, what they can do is share that on their social media and give it the widest possible coverage. That's one of the reasons we're here talking about it today, because it's so important, all that hard work that's gone into it. But for that to be shared, there were about, I think, 100 to 200 people in that conference hall when you presented. It should have been 2,500, 200,000, because that's where we've got to get the message across to everybody. Listen, Paula, it's been an absolute pleasure talking to you as always. And I think, you know, congratulations for all the amazing work that you're doing. And you know, I know your mum and dad are very proud of you, the work that you do. So congratulations for that. And thank you for joining us. In the meantime, can I just say to everybody that's been watching today, a massive thank you for you for coming to understand a little bit more about FASD. And as I said, please do share any material. Make a point of once a week sharing something from the FASD community. We've got our videos on our social media, on our website, and you can absolutely share those. They're there to educate as part of our Be Aware campaign. And we're doing it with the National Organisation of FASD that have just presented this FASD Manifesto as well. So please do share that. Can I also say that we are a charity and we love being able to present these webinars. However, it's a costly process to be able to do it a lot of the time. So if you've enjoyed this and found this useful, please do go to our website and feel free to donate what you feel is worth the time and energy. So thank you all so much for joining us, and we look forward to seeing you next month. If you want to find out a little bit more about FASD, then you can see our entire series of webinars on our YouTube channel, or you can also see it on our new website, which is at www.fasdawareness.org.uk. And we also, I will put a link to Oshay's brain domains as well on our on the YouTube webinar when it comes out. So in the meantime, once again, a massive thank you. And you'll be tired now, so you'll probably need a sleep. So thank you, Paula, for your time tonight. Really thoroughly enjoyed your time. And thank you all for joining us. And we'll see you next time. All the best. Bye-bye for now.